From New York, this is Democracy Now!
Donald Trump's bigotry, his bullying, his bluster are not going to wear well on the American people.
I'm the first one that said, build a wall, but I mean a real wall, not a toy wall like they have right now, a real wall, and you'll solve lots of problems. But we will galvanize the people of this country, and we will beat Hillary Clinton.
Here's the sad truth. There is no other Donald Trump. This is it.
I'm the only one that beats Hillary Clinton. I beat her, and I have not started on Hillary yet.
Tonight, a 3-hour Democracy Now! Special. We're just 30 minutes away from one of the most anticipated presidential debates in recent U.S. history. Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, round one. We'll air the full debate from Hofstra University in Long Island, plus host a pre- and post-debate roundtable. We'll speak with Eddie Glaude, chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University, Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant. She's in Seattle. Sociologist Arlie Russell-Hochschild, author of Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning on the American Right. Immigrant rights attorney Isabel Garcia. She's on the border in Tucson, Arizona, and prize-winning investigative journalist Alan Nairn, as well as Guantanamo attorney Ramzi Kassem, who's a professor of law at City University of New York School of Law. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In less than 30 minutes, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will square off in what's expected to be the most watched presidential debate in U.S. history. Some TV network executives predict as many as 100 million people will tune in. Tonight's 90-minute debate is being held at Hofstra University on Long Island here in New York. On Democracy Now! We'll be airing the entire debate uninterrupted starting at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Third-party candidates, including Libertarian Gary Johnson and the Green Party's Jill Stein, will be excluded under stringent rules set by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties. Just before we went on air, police arrested a number of activists at Hofstra who were protesting the exclusion of third-party candidates from the debate. Earlier in the day, Green Party candidate Dr. Jill Stein was stopped by Hofstra security and Nassau County Police, then escorted off the campus. Stein was on her way to do an interview with MSNBC at Hofstra. Jill Stein will join us Tuesday, that's tomorrow, here in our studio in a 2-hour Expanding the Debate special. We'll re-air tonight's debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and give Stein a chance to respond to the same questions at her own podium. We've also invited Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson, but he says he can't make it. As we count down the minutes to the Trump-Clinton showdown, we're joined now by 4 guests. Eddie Glaude, chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. Alan Nairn, longtime investigative journalist and activist. Ramzi Kassem, a professor of law at City University of New York School of Law, and attorney for many men held at Guantanamo. They're all joining me here in New York, our guests. And in Tucson, Arizona, immigrants' rights attorney Isabel Garcia, co-chair of the Coalition for Human Rights. We welcome you all to Democracy Now! Professor Eddie Glaude, what do you want to hear tonight?
Well, I would love to hear Secretary Clinton lay out a progressive agenda to actually try to speak to millennial voters, to actually address the circumstances that we see in Charlotte, to actually not bank right, but to bank left. That's what I would like to see. I don't expect to see that. I think I expect to see Donald Trump to reveal once again who he is. So I think we're going to see in some ways the kind of vacuousness of his platform and of his positions. So in some ways, I expect us to actually see what we've been seeing all election cycle. I don't expect anything new.
Ramzi Qasem, you have been to Guantanamo like 50 times. You're a professor of law. You deal with everything from men imprisoned at Guantanamo to immigrants who are being deported from this country. What do you want addressed?
You know, I would have liked to see a more progressive platform on security and foreign policy issues from candidate Clinton, but unfortunately, my expectation, based on her record and President Obama's cabinet, is that she will veer more to the hawkish side. There will be important differences between her positions on some of these issues and Donald Trump's, to be sure. But unfortunately, we are still way to the right of what we would have hoped in terms of President Obama and now a potential President Clinton rolling back some of the excesses of the Bush era in terms of foreign policy, in terms of national security.
Mm-hmm. Alan Nairn, you just did a piece for your news and comment blog, Debate Night 1, 2016, Notes on Trump and Clinton Restraint. What do you mean?
Well, the U.S. policy is to run the world, and Trump has said he's against that. So some people think he will be less lethal abroad than Clinton. But what Trump's saying is exactly what George W. Bush said. He ran to the left of Gore on intervention. He said he was against nation building. And then after the 9/11 attack, he invaded two countries. He caused the death of more than 1 million people. He sent U.S. troops into sustained combat. Now, does anybody think that once Trump takes office, attacks on U.S. targets will cease? And does anybody think Trump will be more restrained in response than Bush? For that matter, does anyone think Trump will want to be known as having a lower death toll from drone strikes than Obama? Trump has already talked about nuclear weapons for Saudi Arabia. He backs the mass murdering al-Sisi of Egypt even more enthusiastically than Clinton does. He wants to give Israel more arms than even Obama or Clinton do. He said that he will stand by ISIS if they go after Assad in Syria. Whoever wins this, if either Bush or Clinton, if either Trump or Clinton win this election, mass murder will win.
Trump or Clinton?
Yeah, if either Trump or Clinton win the election, mass murder will win. If you look at who's supporting them, the national security bureaucrats, those of the killing bureaucracy, tend to support Clinton. But Cheney and Rumsfeld, the two leading murder adventurers, they're backing Trump. Under Trump, he'll sustain the killing bureaucracy. He's already said he wants huge boosts in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, also the CIA. Congress wouldn't allow cuts in that, but he adds the extra element of animal spirits in the tradition of someone like Cheney or General Curtis LeMay. He's called on China to disappear Kim Jong-un of North Korea. If people think that Trump will be less lethal and dangerous abroad, they haven't looked at his proposals and they haven't looked at history. And I think they should both be asked, as president, will you be accountable? If your forces murder civilians, are you ready to be put on trial for that? And within the U.S., when police kill civilians, should they all be put on trial?
So you sound equally critical of both of them. Who do you plan to vote for?
I vote in New York, so I'll vote for Stein of the Green Party. But if it were in Ohio, I would vote for Clinton because Trump has to be stopped. Trump is a white supremacist. He's a proto-fascist. If you get Trump, you not only get him as an individual in the White House, you also get a clear path for the Paul Ryan Koch brothers agenda coming out of Congress. You get a series of new Scalias constituting a majority on the Supreme Court who will then have the policy to set that, have the power to set that agenda in stone. And apart from government, Trump is unleashing the beast in white America. It's already happening. He's appealing to the worst instincts regarding race among the white population. And white people have to decide, do they want to try to diminish racism or not? Trump is pulling in the wrong direction. And he's suggesting that it's fun, it's cool, you're violating political correctness when you indulge in more racism. So not only would it mean a radical shift to the right in American politics, the opening for a kind of fascism similar to the kind that you see in the Philippines with someone like Duterte, in Egypt with someone like his buddy al-Sisi, but it's also unleashing forces in American society. Imagine what it'll do to the rate of police shootings of black civilians. Imagine what Giuliani and Christie in a Trump Justice Department will do to the Black Lives Matter movement, will do to other activists. This is a very serious choice. The rich win no matter if it's Clinton or Trump. But with Trump, you also get the constituency of the white supremacists. With Clinton, at least you get a constituency of the justice movements that have a foothold in the party and will be able to fight both from inside and the outside. With Trump, they'll be fighting for their lives.
Isabel Garcia, you're on the border, you're in Tucson, you're a longtime immigrants' rights advocate, attorney. Can you talk about what your concerns are? Not just what you want to hear the candidates say, but also what the candidates have said. You know, they're not just laying out their positions for the first time tonight. We have a very good idea. Both of them have been engaged in many debates, have traveled the country, given hundreds of speeches, and Hillary Clinton has governed herself. What are your thoughts tonight?
Well, this evening, I'm hoping that the American public can see very clearly who Trump is attempting to garner favor with. There's a lot of code language, and then when it comes to Mexicans and immigrants, there's no code necessary. He has openly made Mexico and the wall his #1 issue, and so I expect the Democrats to fight back. It's very dangerous what we're engaging in. We live in a militarized border. We too are very realistic that, in fact, it was a Clinton administration and everybody else who has militarized this border. Both parties share the blame in refusing to acknowledge to the American public that we, the United States, particularly those economic interests, have created this immigration situation. We have invited Mexican immigrants to come since the early 1900s, and then we've engaged in foreign policies and wars, in particular to the South and Latin America, where we see devastation in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, countries that are under U.S. interest, with people fleeing here. And until both parties begin to tell the American public the truth about why immigrants are here, we're going to have the problem. We, in this country, not only lack the knowledge of how this country was founded on the genocide of indigenous and land grabs, we really have not taught any the history of labor, of slavery, post-slavery, and we have not taught the history of immigration. And so if we're ever to move forward, we have to do it now, because otherwise the forces under Trump will destroy us. I want Clinton to address us very clearly, to acknowledge very clearly that immigrants are a very important part and always have been in our country, and that we must demilitarize not only our police agencies, but the largest police agency we have of all, the U.S. Border Patrol. Still a civil enforcement agency, thank goodness, but more and more we are violating posse comitatus acts, really. We are more and more engaging the Department of Defense in regard to the governance of our borders. And so we do have a crisis. We have a crisis of death and disappearance at this border. We have a crisis of brutality. 46 men have been shot and killed by the Border Patrol. We have very common issues across this country with the brutality against black and brown people, against Muslim people. And so we must come together very clearly. As the journalist before me said, very sobering that we must assess what is our reality. Trump and the Republicans will kick us down decades while we can continue to battle the Democratic Party for what is right for working people in this country and across the world.
And it was President Obama who was dubbed Deporter-in-Chief by his close associates, you know, the establishment immigrants' rights community, many nonprofits working outside and inside the White House. It was they, I think, when he hit something like 2 million deportations that said this. Yes. So how do you respond when you say, at least the Democrats, it's not a wall, it's a door, perhaps open a crack, and activists have a foothold, as Alan was just saying, and you can kick it open. But you just saw, for example, President Obama preside over a refugee summit at the United Nations. And at this summit, there was this non-binding resolution that said no children should be detained. It was the U.S. that changed that language to say that should, rarely be detained. Rarely. And that wasn't only for the U.S., but that keeps kids in jails from Pennsylvania and Berks to other places. That sets the standard for countries all over the world.
Absolutely. The Democrats have been as responsible as the Republicans. We called Obama Deporter-in-Chief because, in fact, he was the latest recipient of this largesse that we've allowed the Department of Homeland Security. He has allowed it to grow in unprecedented fashion, to basically kill and disappear people along the border and to criminalize them. Almost 50% of all the federal criminal prosecutions across this country are for illegal entry and re-entry. So the Democrats, under prior President Clinton, he militarized this border. He pushed NAFTA that caused millions to come across here. And then he imposed laws internally that were very limiting for immigrants. So we're under no illusions. But it is clear that President Obama had to listen to the grassroots. And he began to act with executive orders, and we must push that door open. I'll tell you, the Republicans push us down further in other areas, in the environment and everywhere. But I'll tell you, both Democrats and Republicans at that level essentially hire the same military and the same economic people, and so we are working within that limitation.
Ramzi Qasem, you work on immigration rights as well here in New York. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad reality that the Obama administration has shattered records every single year in both terms where President Obama has been in office in terms of deportations. He has surpassed the Bush administration's 8 years, and that's just one of the unsavory distinctions that this administration carries. And Hillary Clinton is a part of this administration. She was a cabinet member. And there have been interesting accounts of late that revealed that on many foreign policy decisions, she has tended to be far more hawkish than President Obama even. Now, keep in mind, when you look at just one aspect of the way in which the U.S. has participated in the world under President Obama, namely drone strikes, President Obama had, in his first year in office, he surpassed President Bush's entire 8-year term in the use of drones to execute individuals without trial or fair process. Now, we can expect that to hold under President Clinton, or maybe even get worse. So it is sad that these are the choices that we have in this country. I mean, in the end, I'll say that if you live in a swing state, and if you care about certain issues like justice and human rights, then unfortunately you are in an election where there's really one candidate that you can vote for, and that's Hillary Clinton. But if, like me, you live in New York City, then you might be able to vote your conscience. But that is still a sad state of affairs, where the candidate of the left, of the supposed American left, is extremely hawkish and demonstrably so.
Eddie Glaude.
This is the confusion that's been at the heart of the Clinton campaign. On the one hand, they want to activate what is known as the Obama coalition, right, which has everything to do with progressive whites, has everything to do with voters of color and the like, and young voters, right? And then on the other hand, they seem to be doing exactly what the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council, and others unleashed during the Clinton years, right? That is, they want to triangulate and appeal to the median white voter in western Pennsylvania, the suburbs of Philadelphia, in Ohio, and the like, white working class, high school educated folks. And what you see is this assumption that fear of Trump is sufficient to motivate the base. But people still remember when the kids were trying to cross the border from Honduras and other places, that Hillary Clinton said, send them back home. Folks still know that, I mean, we've been talking about the president being the deportation president, and folks aren't talking about that Florida has been seeing in-migration of Puerto Ricans, right, that are impacting the demographics of that community, of that state. And Obama threw Puerto Rico under the bus. Has thrown Puerto Rico under the bus. And at the same time that this is happening, African Americans are being shot down an epidemic, at least it feels like an epidemic of murder in our communities. And suddenly, because of the fear of Trump, we're supposed to be excited to go out and vote for Hillary Clinton when we actually believe that she's the poster child for business as usual. Trump isn't the poster child for business as usual. That's neo-fascism. But business as usual is Hillary Clinton. So what we're going to see tonight, I think, right, is the kind of the sorry state, the sad state of American politics. And I think what we've been talking about, and I just wrote a piece in Time magazine about this, that we have to engage in strategic voting, and it's a long-standing approach, the critical approach of the left to bring pressure to bear on the candidate and try to open up space for us to do some work. But one thing we can't do is let Hillary Clinton believe she has the mandate. And I think this is what we will see coming out of this debate. I mean, I think a harder and more direct critique of Hillary Clinton, unless she banks left as opposed to right.
Alan Nairn.
Professor Cloud just mentioned Puerto Rico. That's a good example of the situation. As everybody just said, the Democrats and the Republicans created the crisis jointly. The destruction of the American middle class and working class, the massive destruction of working people overseas by supporting repression in places like Latin America, mainly for the benefit of American business people like Trump who do their production overseas. That business aspect largely accounts for the migration coming up from Mexico and Central America. Then you have the Bush invasions that shattered the Middle East, that are creating the migrants fleeing from there, mainly into Europe. But the specter of them coming to the U.S. has been one of Trump's main rallying cries. Now, with Puerto Rico, the crisis in Puerto Rico, where public services have been completely gutted, the government is on the verge of collapse. This is happening because of a massive debt incurred mainly to U.S. vulture hedge funds. And the leader of that vulture hedge fund force that has been looting and burning Puerto Rico is a guy named Paulson, who is now one of the key Wall Street advisors for Trump. So the Democrats and the Republicans have jointly created this situation, but the situation has, well, it produced two figures. First, it produced Sanders, who stood as a real alternative for actual progress, for constructively dealing with the collapse of the working and middle class, by redistributing wealth, by restoring some rule of law to the functioning of American business. But Sanders lost. So when Sanders lost, the possibility for progress by electoral means at this moment disappeared. Now there will definitely be a regression because Clinton is even worse than Obama, as bad as Obama was. But we have to recognize that Trump is in another category altogether. What Trump represents is, on the one hand, within government, a systematic road to dismantling all the progressive achievements of the last 50 years on civil rights, on voting enfranchisement, on environment, on labor, on women's rights, on anything you can think of. That's within government, a systematic dismantling through the radical right Congress and a new radical right Supreme Court. But then, even more ominously within society, unleashing the beast, mob attacks on Muslims, on Mexican Americans, on African Americans. Think about it. What do you think will happen the day after Trump is elected to the rate of police shootings of black civilians? Is it going to go up or is it going to go down? If Trump is elected, white racists will take that as a vindication, and those white racists who happen to be cops will take it as a mandate. A Trump Justice Department isn't going to prosecute them. A Trump Justice Department is going to go after the voting rolls. They're going to try to exclude even more African Americans, even more Latinos, even more of any group that might conceivably vote against Republicans in the future. I mean, this is a fundamental choice for Americans now. Trump is a massive danger. The chance for progress passed with Sanders. Now it's a matter of damage control, and Trump must be stopped.
Right now, we are looking at what's happening at Hofstra. The debate is about to begin, but I want to just share a comment of George Farah, the founder and executive director of Open Debates, who spoke on Democracy Now! 4 years ago in the last election, but it holds true today, how the Democrats and Republicans took control of the debate process.
The League of Women Voters ran the presidential debate process from 1976 until 1984, and they were a very courageous and genuinely independent, nonpartisan sponsor. And whenever the candidates attempted to manipulate the presidential debates behind closed doors, either to exclude a viable independent candidate or to sanitize the formats, the League had the courage to challenge the Republican Democratic nominees and, if necessary, go public. In 1980, independent candidate John B. Anderson was polling about 12% of the polls. The League insisted that Anderson be allowed to participate because the vast majority of the American people wanted to see him. But President Jimmy Carter, refused to debate him. The League went forward anyway and held a presidential debate with an empty chair, showing that Jimmy Carter wasn't going to show up. 4 years later, when the Republican Democratic nominees tried to get rid of difficult questions by vetoing 80 of the moderators that they had proposed to host the debates, the League said this is unacceptable. They held a press conference and attacked the campaigns for trying to get rid of difficult questions. And lastly, in 1988 was the first attempt by the Republican and Democratic campaigns to negotiate a detailed contract. It was tame by comparison, a mere 12 pages. It talked about who could be in the audience and how the format would be structured. But the League found that kind of lack of transparency and that kind of candidate control to be fundamentally outrageous and antithetical to our democratic process. They released the contract and stated they refused to be an accessory to the hoodwinking of the American people and refused to implement it. And today, what do we have? We have a private corporation that was created by the Republican Democratic parties called the Commission on Presidential Debates. It seized control of the presidential debates precisely because the League was independent, precisely because this women's organization had the guts to stand up to the candidates that the major party candidates had nominated.
That was George Farah talking about the Commission on Presidential Debates, which wrested control of the debates from the League of Women Voters. The debate will begin in exactly 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Lester Holt has already gone to the stage, the NBC News anchor, making small talk now. The families of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have entered the hall. If you had a question that you wanted to see answered tonight, Alan, what would that question be? Alan Nairn.
Well, one, as I mentioned before, is should presidents and cops be prosecuted for murder? Another is, should people who inherit $1 billion or more have to pay a 90% tax to the government? And if they're not willing to buy that, what if those funds from the inheriting billionaires were earmarked to go to the 42 million people living in U.S. households that are facing hunger, according to the Department of Agriculture, or to the nearly 800 million people worldwide who are malnourished? That would be an interesting question for both of them.
Isabel Garcia, is there a question you'd like to see asked tonight? And, of course, on the other side of this debate, we'll have an extended discussion about what was asked, what was revealed, and we'll play some clips of that debate for everyone to respond to and talk to. And I want to say to our audience who's watching this globally, you can share your thoughts, you can tweet at us, you can go to our Facebook page, you can let us know what you think, and we'll bring that into the discussion in the last hour. The debate will be from 9:03 Eastern Time to 10:30. It'll be uninterrupted, and then we'll have an hour afterwards to have an extended discussion. We will also be joined by Arlie Russell Hochschild, sociologist and writer who has a professor emerita at the University of California, Berkeley, just wrote the book, Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning on the American Right. We will also be joined by Kshama Sawant, the Socialist City Council member from Seattle, who helped win the $15 an hour minimum wage for all workers in Seattle. She's part of the Socialist Alternative. Professor Eddie Glaude, some questions you'd like to hear tonight.
Well, you know, the fundamental question for me is, what will you substantively do to address America's original sin? And that is not only that we're a settler colonial state, but to address fundamentally the question of race in this country.
Isabel Garcia in Tucson.
Yes, I'd like to know what their positions on how we're going to view our Latin American countries, our partners here, both militarily and economically, what their plans are with these devastating free trade agreements, and particularly their continued support of the School of the Americas and all of the military's expenditure down in Latin America. I want to know what their position will be on this.
And Ramsey Kassem, if you were Lester Holt up there on the stage at Hofstra.
If I could put a question only to Hillary Clinton, in the interest of avoiding giving Donald Trump more airtime than he already gets, I would ask her what she intends to do to win over those Bernie Sanders voters.
What do you think she should do?
I think there's a whole range of issues that those voters care about, where she's either been silent or her positions have been less than satisfying. And I would expect her to move in that direction, because right now the race is frighteningly close. And I think those voters should not be taken for granted.
And Alan Nairn, on that issue of appealing to Bernie Sanders voters.
Well, we'll ask Clinton if she will completely repudiate what her husband did on NAFTA, and ask if she will now publicly call on Obama to not bring TPP up in the lame duck session, because Obama is ready to make a full-on push for TPP, and he may have a chance because he'll have Republican backing. But if Clinton tonight takes a very strong stance against it and says to Obama, absolutely not, that would kill it. That would kill TPP once and for all. Clinton says she wants that. Make her do it.
Yeah,
Eddie Glaude.
I mean, it just seems to me that, you know, one of the things that really excited the Bernie coalition is his insistence that the economy was rigged, that this move to financialization had simply decimated workers, and that Hillary Clinton would have to do a fundamental about-face, right, in order to do the work that I think actually needs to be done in order to excite the Sanders coalition. And that involves fundamentally, right, a substantive and serious critique of financialization.
Well, we are moving on right now to the debate at Hofstra University. It's